And so this is built out of sort of my own experiences and sort of my own studies in this areas. And but this is kind of a typical way to look at music of the world from a kind of an ethnomusicological standpoint, and from a kind of looking at it as a sociologist as opposed to a musicologist, where you're trying to assign real strict, rules and things, labels to everything. This approach that I use, and a lot of people use, not my approach, is not my, this kind of idea is not my original idea. But this approach really offers just a lot of kind of just discussion and kind of open-minded sorts of sharing and observations, and it's a lot of fun. So the idea of just breaking it down to sound, behavior, and ideas. And that a lot of times I've done this with young students. I did a class where we made like passports, and we kind of, kind of looked at all these. We looked at a whole lot of, we made a list of countries. Some of them, the students got to pick which countries they were interested in, and we kind of made this list, and then we, created these passports that we could, and they got a stamp for each country every time we, finished cool. So it was a lot of fun. But I think that, so on the chart that I made, sorry, not to get too far here,
is it cool, Lauren, if I go ahead and screen share that too? So
sure.
That together?
But yeah, I was gonna say the chart that I made is not necessarily a full list of information. It's just sort of things that I just kind of randomly put on there as examples. And if you were to do this exercise with students, it's kind of amazing the observations that students make as far as what they're hearing. Some of the, when we talk about the sound and the music itself, that's a little bit more specific and a little bit more researched coming from my end. But the behavior and the ideas really come a lot from listening and watching videos of the music, and kind of seeing what we see and hearing what we hear, and trying to make some kinds of connections with that. I love to start with kind of Western art music and what we're familiar with, so that we understand what that means when we say sound, behavior, and ideas, so that gives us a reference point to everyone else. So that's so I just wanted to say that this particular chart isn't exhaustive in its information. It's very just, it's a kind of a starting point. It's a thing you can use as a guide, and it would be what I would use probably to just in a lecture situation to get the conversation started. So
okay. Lauren, I was gonna, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask, and you'll probably get into this, but I remember talking a lot last time in our first conversation, where we focused a lot on the feelings of music, right? How that puts you in a certain mental, emotional state. And so looking at the chart and kind of listening to things, it really makes me kind of think, how do we connect that with American music or Western music, right? With kind of some of the different feelings or moods that might be expressed in music from different countries. How do we kind of bridge that gap?
Well, and I think that really, if you think about the kinds of music that people grew up with, these are the kinds of music that people from whatever country you're listening to that music from, that's what they relate to, that's what they're hearing, that's what, and so the same kinds of kind of emotions of happiness maybe, or fear, or characterizations. Like I love Chinese opera because they have these sort of stock characters and these sounds, like specific drums and cymbals that go along with, you know, the bad guy gets these certain kinds of sounds, and it is, and it's so different than what we associate with, say, we use Darth Vader, you know, the march, you know, as being sort of this menacing kind of sound. That's right. But you know, when you listen to Chinese opera, it's a completely different, but culturally, if you've learned kind of what these sounds mean and who these characters are in these stories, then those sounds kind of have the same relationship to you when you hear them as well. So I love thinking about that idea that when you first play it a lot, especially with you know, Chinese opera, it's at first you turn it on and a lot of times people go, what is that? That's very weird. I know, you know, it's very loud, and why do they sound like that? And so it's there's just so many different sounds to explore that that it's fascinating.
Well, one thing too, I think we connected to last time was history, right? How a lot of those sounds were either protest or mirrored something that was going on in politics. And so I thought that was really cool. You were able to connect it to, let's dig into why it sounds this way. So I wonder, with looking at India and China, and I can't remember the other one right now.
Africa is the other
Africa,
one I put on
yes.
there. Yeah.
You know, how is there ways with those countries in particular, or kind of in your teaching past, where you were able to take the music and connect it to history or help them explore that more?
Yeah, yes. And especially when you look at music in China and you look at the music of India, they have a very, I mean, the music that comes out of India is exceptionally ancient and very classically based. It's very learned. It's all written down. It was prescribed, you know, thousands of years ago. And so there's an amazing, and then I don't know if you noticed, but in the chart, like you have the classical Indian music from the north of India, which is traditionally or primarily in India, the northern part of India is more Muslim in faith, and then the southern part of India tends to be Hindu, and so they're really very different religions, and they have a pretty volatile history in those countries. But if you look at the music, it's funny because they really separate it out as being music from northern India and music from southern India, but they're really the same. They're the same. They pretty much do the same things. They use the same kinds of instruments. They have, you know, and so if you are not familiar with the music at all and you're trying to, you know, separate those out and find the differences between them, it's interesting because it's very hard to do. And most of the, you know, kind of the separation of those musical traditions came because of kind of the political differences and the separations of the people in that country, and kind of what they, the Hindu religion uses that music and that dance in their temple, whereas the Muslim religion does not use that music in their worship, but they do use it as a high art form. So, but it's, you know, kind of similar structure. And so I think to me, it's fascinating to kind of see those differences and those similarities while that country is trying to work those things out politically as well. The other thing I think that there's a couple of the videos on that list from that's in the Africa list. One in particular.
Sure. Do you want me to go ahead and share that, Lauren? So we can.
If you want, yeah.
Okay.
One of the tribal leaders, this video is fantastic, and he talks about how music and speech are rhythm, And I just love this video, and he talks about how music, I'm pretty sure I put it in here. Yeah, this one right here, Foley, there is no movement without rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes in a bit about how the drumming of the djembe is related to speech and how they communicate with it. And it's a 10-minute video, so we don't really have time to watch it right now. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful video. And especially if you're doing drumming with your students, it has, the unfortunate part of this video is there's a couple of shots where some of the women don't have tops on. And so showing it to a 5th grade class is problematic. And it's not lewd or anything. It's just, I understand the problem of that. And so if there was a way to, fuzz that part of the video out while you're showing it, it's such a beautiful video. And, but he talks about, it's very illuminating about how drumming in Africa is a form of communication, and how speech is critical in Africa to creating all of these different forms of drumming and drum communication. And you think about Africa, there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different dialects and ethno-linguistic groups. And so you think about how that relates to drumming and the different kinds of rhythmic drumming and sounds that come out of Africa, because all of the different languages that are coming out of Africa. It's an amazing complexity of music that comes out of the entire continent. And it's so vast. I mean, from the south of Africa all the way through the north, it changes. There's so many different, you could spend 10 years studying the music of Africa and you would just scratch the surface. So I think kind of the relationship of language to music in studying the music of Africa is so cool. And you can hear it right away. And that video in particular really illuminates that. I love it. And then the Kathak dance and the Teen Tall video that's in the Indian video, I think is completely amazing too. I don't know if you can pop that back up there for a second, but I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch any of that, but the rhythmic structure of Indian music is very rigid and very prescribed and specific, and it's sort of like how we have to practice our scales on our instruments. In Indian music, you have, not only do you have melodic scales, you have kind of rhythmic scales, if you will, as well, kind of these patterns that go along with it, and they get incredibly complex. And so one of the things that they do is if they have to not only be able to play these rhythms like on a drum, but also be able to speak them. And so this Teen Tall video, she's doing some of that. And it's, I also just find that students love that when they watch it, and it sounds like it's improvised. And when they realize, what I love to do is you can find the actual rhythmic mode and write out all the syllables. I like to write them all out on the board so they can try to say them, and then listen to her say it as she says it. It's an amazing feat. It's incredible.
Lauren, can we listen to a brief excerpt from that? Would that be
yeah
okay?
Yeah.
You were just describing it and it really made me want to listen to it, so
yeah
we'll play it for a minute here.
You might need to reshare your screen and share the computer audio.
Oh, okay. Let me see. Gotcha. So you guys can't hear it at all?
Yeah, so if you
I'm having the time of my life over here then. Okay.
So if you stop share and then when you go to reshare it and you select the screen down at the bottom, there's a little box you click that says share computer audio.
Thank you, Craig. That was...
We've crossed this bridge so many times.
Have you? Okay.
Faculty meetings and Zooms with the students and stuff.
You have a higher level of
well, we use Zoom
than I do.
to like try and record videos for the students, and I went through this whole thing talking about Chrome Music Labs and like recording myself doing just a Zoom by myself and showing them what to do, and then I realized I didn't click the share computer audio.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so I had to go and re-record the whole thing because they couldn't.
Man.
It was like, oh, let's listen to what I just made on this thing, and it's like silence.
Oh man. Well, because of your help, I have figured it out. So I'm gonna show you all my skills, my Zoom skills here. Let's see. All right, check this out.
She's using the bells and her feet as her percussion instruments.
Go ahead and stop it there because of time.
Yeah, she's gonna, why don't you put it like just a couple bit, yeah, like to back it up a little bit, back it up, right, go forward a little bit more, right there.
Okay.
She's gonna say it now. What she's been tapping. I don't know if you can tell, but her feet are. So you can stop it. I know, I love it. So that sounds like they're just kind of randomly going ting ta 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 ting 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 ta ta, but it's very prescribed and very specific. So if you can get a hold of some of you can find these online and they're written out. You know, a lot of them they're a lot of fun to do with kids.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, and it's a real appreciation of that kind of it's, you know, that kind of practice. Man, I think it's amazing.
Well, oh no, you can go.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Craig and Mary Beth, you know, if you guys wanted to share, or has there been any overlap with some of the things that Lauren's talking about, and what you guys have been doing with your curriculum?
I mean, for us, like we have like a world music ensemble that we do as like an enrichment ensemble that meets before school. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like kind of fused our Orff ensemble with our drumming group. And we've
covered a lot of the stuff with the academic.
Yeah. A lot of times in elementary school, the world music typically like
leans
towards a lot of like African music and African
Yeah.
drumming and stuff. Occasionally branching out into other areas, but it's a solid like starting point.
Mhm.
She did last summer. She did her world music drumming certification for level 1. But one of the things that I like to do from time to time with students, for like, let's say there's like a day where schedule's been like messed up and I've got like a bunch of kids in my room, or like for some reason half the class is missing. Stomp's Odyssey or whatever, they cover a lot of different cultures and stuff. And like the video that we just watched with the Teen Tall, they've got I want to say there's a section in there where they kind of cover that, where the guy, I think, speaks it and then he plays it on one of the tabla drums. And the kids always seem really interested in that. Like it's
it's really fun. I think it's
it, and but yeah.
And really, I mean, that you're practicing such rhythmic precision, and if you can do that, even as a group, but that kind of focus and that kind of, concentration on being able to do that sort of, and then if you can figure out a way to, the fact that she's dancing it, her feet are playing that rhythm, and then she's saying the rhythm, and then at times she starts to say it and dance it at the same time, which just makes
we also we have a program that we use in Hillsborough County for elementary school program or elementary music called conversational solfege, which is, it's kind of similar to like you learn how to speak it before you learn how to like play it, or before you learn how to read it, or before you're shown written music and says, this is a quarter note, this is one beat, this is what you do, blah blah blah. And we go through and we speak on syllables, and we start with like simple 2/4, do's and do days. Do days are pairs of eighth notes, do's are quarter notes. And then we start the kids by speaking them using like neutral syllables first. And the whole concept is kind of wrapped around, it's very similar to them learning how to speak it, to understand how to perform it. But then it's also kind of mixed in with the way that we acquire language and the way we acquire like reading skills. You learn how to speak before you learn how to read, and someone puts a book in front of you and says, this is a word. So we use that. It's like a supplementary curriculum that we use from a little bit each day or whatever, as the kids come into class, to kind of build their music literacy.
So that'd be a cool exercise too, to compare that with, how you're doing that with kind of Western concepts and solfege, and then how you might, how it's being applied in other forms of music and other cultures. Yes. And, particularly, I love to pull out the Chinese opera too. I just think it's a great comparison. It's so, and again, they're, in Chinese opera, not only do the sounds, those unusual to our ears timbres of singing, but then also the cymbals and the drums that they're using are really pronunciation and punctuating specific ideas as well. So I think it's cool to compare that maybe to how they're using the cymbals and the drums in China to Africa to communicate, because when they were using talking drums in Africa, and then kind of how they're talking with the drums and the cymbals in China, it generates a lot of really cool conversation with the students as well.
Yeah. I was going to ask Lauren, with looking at, let me go to the chart real quick, and hopefully everybody saw that in the waiting room if they didn't. But ideas, you're kind of getting into the way that instrumentation is used differently, diversely in different countries. How does that relate to them expressing this certain idea or view of the world that they want to get across.
Are you asking me that question?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Or whoever would want to answer it, you know. I guess, you know, how do we, you know, taking something like rhythm, right? How do we connect rhythm to a certain idea that's being expressed in the music?
I think that that's certainly a kind of something to be done in the moment of when you're listening to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but what again I like to look at with, I spend a lot of time talking about music and the ideas and the sounds and that they create, and so I do that with Western music first. And a lot of times we don't think a lot about how we use music. You know, that's what we were talking about last time, kind of the idea that music's in the grocery store and music's on TV and music's in video games, and, you know, and video game music is super cool. But what's it really being, you know, what's it being used for in the video game? You know, it's not just there to keep you playing the game. It is, but also, I mean, it's part of the game. It's to warn you. It's to kind of give you clues. It's to, you know, and so
It
think
clues you into what's happening in the music.
Right.
What's happening in the game.
Exactly. And I think it's
you know when the boss is about to show up because the music changes and you're like, something's going to go down.
Apparently we have some gamers here in the chat. So
yes. Well, and I think, and so it's important to think about how, because we don't think about music, I don't think we think about it as a culture as much as other cultures do. I mean, music is such a part of other cultures' kind of daily life, and they understand sort of its importance and what its purpose is and what they're using it for, and we don't pay as much attention to that. And so this kind of study is really nice for that, because it can kind of illuminate, well, hey, well, they use it in worship, but we use it in worship too, you know, I mean, and kind of going backwards and thinking about culturally and its importance.
That was, we used for one of our e-learning assignments. We got it from another music teacher, and it was like, go and interview a family member, call your grandma, call your aunts or uncles, or talk to your parents. And it was to like start that conversation of like, what kinds of songs or games did you play as a kid that involved music? Like, you know, whether it's, you know, like a hand game or something you played on the playground. Did you play instruments growing up? What role did music play in your life growing up? And looking at some of the responses, like one of our fifth graders, I think he's fifth grade. One of our fifth graders, his dad grew up in the islands and learned how to play steel pan growing up. And so, you know, it's like, you know, it's nice. It's interesting to look at like the different roles that some people, and some of the kids actually really took really good notes, and they found someone good to like interview to get like nice quality answers, not just like,
my dad liked patty cake.
Yeah, my dad liked patty cake. I had one student who interviewed her brother, who's not much older than she is, and so most of the answers were, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but it was nice to see the kids kind of like actually like find someone and participate and really get some quality answers on it too. And it's a different look at music, because like you were saying, like we take music for granted a little bit, and it's everywhere, but it's always like background, it's always ancillary, it's never like, it's not usually like the focus.
Right. And I think it's important for us to, you know, continue to think about that, especially when, you know, the arts are sort of getting eliminated from so many things, and understanding why it's important and why it's important to us culturally and as a society, not just, you know, because people need to make money at, making music. That's really not why it's important at all. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many other things.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask. Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, like, I don't know, Craig or Mary Beth or Lauren, like, so active listening, right? How do you guys do that in your classrooms? Because it seems like from our conversation so far that other cultures maybe just have a natural awareness or just a presence while listening to music that maybe we've lost in America or in the Western world. And so are there ways you guys encourage active listening or really kind of getting into music in a way that many students probably aren't used to doing?
I mean, for us, I've done listening to music several different ways. I've done like Squilt is a thing that some elementary teachers like to do. It's super quiet, uninterrupted listening time. And it's basically like a graphic organizer for them to kind of keep track of their notes into like different categories. Like there's a mood category, there's tempo, dynamics, and then instrumentation. So it gives them a chance to like listen for familiar things, but it gives them kind of like an anchor for what they're supposed to be listening for. And it gives them one of them is the mood. So it gives them that time to like think about like, what am I feeling while I'm listening to this? What imagery does this take in or bring into my mind? Listening maps are good. With third grade, we talked about like spirituals and as part of their curriculum, and there was some good through our like music text. It was a listening map that kind of goes along and kind of auto plays itself, and so there's pictures that go along with like artwork that was done representing slavery and escape from slavery, and then there's facts and stuff, and it kind of guides their listening through each section, gives tidbits about the lyrics.
In first grade, it's all dancing and stuff that we learned.
Yeah, and a lot of dancing and stuff with like the younger students and movement.
I think movement is critical for everybody. I think that, encouraging, I try to encourage improvisation and movement, and always when listening. And when I have students listen, I always have them doing something active while they're listening, and that's reacting to the music. So either drawing, or doing something with color, or moving their body, or creating rhythm to go along with what they're listening to. I think it's hard for students to sit still and listen and really engage.
Yeah.
That's, difficult.
Yeah. There was a resource that my cooperating teacher when I was doing my internship in college that she used. It's Santa Longden she's got a series of books and CDs, and it's like folk dances and movement activities from a bunch of different cultures. Like one of the ones that we did was Tinickling from the Philippines, and we actually like taught the kids the folk dance, and we went through like the meter of 4, the meter of 3, and we talked about the nuances of like their music, the differences between like our typical style, how we hear music typically in like 4 or 2 versus how they're typically in patterns of like 3. But she's got some really good resources, and it covers like a whole swath of like, it covers tons of different cultures.
I think it's interesting if you think back to musical experiences that you might have had when you were young. They're almost always tied to some kind of physical activity that accompanies the music itself. And so I learned the song "You Light Up My Life" in school in the 5th grade, and I learned to sign it. and I can still sign it like to this day. And it's not like it's something I practice every day, but it's because that made such an impression on me. I also still know all the words to the song, but
Mm-hmm.
that engagement of me learning the sign language to go along with the words has stuck with me forever. And I think that creating those kinds of, so having, when you're learning a folk dance to go along with a song, learning, kind of creating something tactile to go along with the sound that's going in your brain, because we're just so inundated with sound all the time, that finding ways to hold on to that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and this year at the FMEA convention in January, there was a session where that someone did. It was like scaffolding folk dances, so that each one kind of builds off of each other.
Yeah.
But she created these visuals that were super kid friendly, and the dances are all laid out in like a form, so it helps with that memorizing. But it's also something that, as listeners, like when I do this with my first and second graders, we always listen to the music first, and we listen for the changes in the music. That way we're not sitting there going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we turn around and then it's like we're counting over the music. We have to listen, and we have to step back and use our ears to kind of help guide us through what we're supposed to be doing and where those changes are in the music, and just become more aware of what's happening.
It's funny because that kind of listening, I work a lot with even college age orchestras, and I'm always kind of amazed at how little listening people do.
Yeah.
And, when you're in the middle of a piece and someone is about to come in on a solo or something, and you ask them what's happening there, who's playing with you, or, that sort of thing, and they have absolutely no idea.
It's television.
Yeah, because there's so much, they've been practicing their part and they want to make sure it's perfect, and they might know what the people sitting immediately next to them are doing, but they're not used to sort of listening to everything that's happening. And I think that's something that's important to teach forever. I mean, I think that's something that we should be doing in our listening, no matter what level we're on and who we are musically, that just really helps us learn. And
well, and even that, it helps in life too. Like one of the schools that I worked at before they did 7 Habits of Happy Children as kind of like their social emotional like program. And one of the 7 habits is like seek first to understand, then I think seek first to understand, then be understood, or whatever. It's something along the lines of like you can't listen to respond. You have to like understand what's being said and then go from there. You can't just immediately well, this is what, and I feel like that's a
internal reflection.
Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing with like just society, is that we're all about responding and not about understanding and knowing.
Right.
And so like taking that time to step back and be silent and understand what's happening in music is like, it's teaching the kids that introspection.
And that empathy. Because
Yeah.
really that's, I think, what we're lacking a lot in society these days. And I think there's a lot that we can do with, these, looking at different styles of music and understanding what this music means to that culture, what this music, what this form is being used for, why these sounds are the way they are.
And just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. It's okay.
Right.
It's not what we're used to. Yes. Cuckoo Loca is racing a car. Sorry.
They can join the call too.
Do you want to say hi?
Yeah, we love guests.
Say hi. Hey. Say hi.
You said it's Hank?
the Mickey and the Roadster Racers.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. Does he have any questions? You know,
Hey,
we'll try to answer them.
questions? What do you want to
What's
ask
your
them?
question?
Do you guys like Mickey?
He's
Yeah.
the best. Yeah,
I'm a huge Mickey fan.
Mickey's the best. That's cool.
You want to go sit back on the couch? But come on, let's go sit.
Nice to meet you. That's cool.
All right, say bye.
Bye. Yeah. Dr. Murray, Lauren, I've been mixing up your names. I'm sorry. I was going to ask about a kind of like a more deep question, but because you guys have been doing a great job on the practical, and then Craig, you kind of got philosophical there, so I was going to go in that direction. Yeah, so I was going to ask, one of the points that you made is that music, and I believe it was, let me look at the chart. Yeah, more so music from China specifically could show politics, political ideas, philosophy. And I think about the time we're in, you talked about a need for empathy, and I think about protest music. I think about music that does reflect political ideas. So I didn't know if any of you guys wanted to talk about that, about how some of these countries that we've talked about or Western music shows political ideas and philosophy.
Definitely, in many cultures, the music of their culture is dictated by their government. And so often what you find in protest music in different cultures is sort of ways for them to get around the dictated standard, or whatever the form is, or whatever the music is supposed to be. Kind of, you use these instruments, and you kind of work in these structures, and composers and performers in other cultures and here as well kind of find ways to use that against, and the really savvy ones can figure out a way to do it that is sort of underneath, so only not everybody gets it, so they can actually still play it in the mainstream and not be arrested for, for the protests that are happening, but it's actually, in some way kind of defying the norm. And so I think that's an interesting thing that you find throughout in any culture, are sort of the resistance to strong arming and to political assertions and things that
And just from my background of teaching English, I remember going over in British literature, the Canterbury Tales from Geoffrey Chaucer, and the whole idea was that he's making fun of things in society, so it's a very funny satire, but he was being real about his satire. He was really trying to get people to see how ridiculous these things in society were. And so I love your point about subverting it, but finding kind of like a slick way, a smart way to do that. It's very interesting. That's all. I don't have any more to say. Did you, Craig and Mary Beth, have any questions or anything? I mean, it's been great just to be able to hear what you guys are doing and get to know you more in this time, but like any questions or any thoughts, anything?
I mean, I don't think we have any questions right now. I mean,
that's okay.
I mean, honestly, and the chart that you put together, we're still everything for next year is up in the air, and whether we have some portion of e-learning or whether we're in person or what, there's a lot of stuff to figure out. But I mean, looking at this stuff with the world music and looking at different cultures and taking if we have to take the year and focus on active listening and looking at music from different cultures and focusing on like the sound and the behaviors and stuff that you've got outlined here and the beliefs and ideas and stuff. I feel like this would be it's a really good resource for us if that's what our reality is going to be next year.
Yeah.
You know.
And I'd say doing it with these broad topics as somebody, you know, let's say, I mean, I picked these 3 forms of music because they were they all have their own very specific structure and are different from one another. But I mean, you could pick a whole variety of countries, and if you don't know anything about it, the nice thing about this group of things is that you can be pretty surface with it, but still cover a lot of general information that's useful and really gives you a good introduction to the music itself, which I think is nice. So it doesn't require heavy research and you know and it's kind of fun to explore yourself, you know. You do learn a lot about the different kinds of music.
And I've done normally over the summer I work at the Children's Museum, and I do like their summer camps, and we've done a camp where it's kind of like a world music kind of thing, where each day, kind of like you had mentioned at the beginning of the Zoom, with the passports, and like you learn a little bit. Like we had crafts and stuff that we did where we like looked at different instruments from like puili sticks from Hawaii, and we looked at different aspects of music from these different countries and these different regions of the world, and that was kind of like the week. And we kind of, at the end of the week, I let the kids kind of curate. There's like a parent open house, and I let the kid, all right, this is your area. You're going to take all the stuff that you've made this week, and you're going to kind of curate your own display of all the stuff that you've made and stuff. And like we kind of touch on for like Brazil, like Carnival, and how they use music for the parades, and they make a parade float, and so
that's cool.
I just have to make everything weird, but I feel comfortable to do so. But what I was going to say, just adding to that, Craig and Mary Beth, on Monday for our partner newsletter, we'll be sending out the recording from our first conversation along with the handout and the playlist, so you guys can kind of see how they connect a little bit more. So just look for that Monday for lesson 1, all that. So,
I can't wait to go through this playlist and look at all these look at all these videos.
It's fun.
It's pretty cool.
It was good. Thank you guys so much for coming today. We really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Thank you guys for hosting it.
Definitely. And just let us know as you go through the resources. If we can help, feel free to reach out. We're here for you guys. So.
All right. Sounds good.